Speaking on the Senate floor today, Mitch McConnell made it clear the FBI investigation may be ongoing, but he's already made up his mind, and he's sick of waiting.
Our Democratic friends will try to move the goalposts yet again. Just yesterday, they submitted a list of 24 people whom they wanted the FBI to interview. So I'm confident we'll hear that even the very same supplemental FBI investigation Democrats had so loudly demanded is now magically no longer sufficient. After the FBI shares what they've found, senators will have the opportunity to vote. We'll have the opportunity to vote no on the politics of personal destruction. We'll have the opportunity to vote yes on this fine nominee.
McConnell promised to vote by the end of the week, which could mean procedural votes starting the next day or two. The problem? Even the White House has signaled they're open to a much more comprehensive look.
My White House will do whatever the senators want. I'm open to whatever they want. The one thing I want is speed. The FBI should interview anybody that they want within reason.
And while there's plenty partisan disagreement here, there's one thing both sides have come to agree upon.
It's not a question of drinking. Everybody, millions of people in America drink. It's a question of whether you are lying before the Judiciary Committee of the United States Senate. And if you are lying, you should not be seated.
I've said, and some of my colleagues have said as well, any nominee that lies to the committee, that is disqualifying.
I don't think you should lie to Congress, and there have been a lot of people over the last year that have lied to Congress, and to me that would not be acceptable.
Okay, but does it depend on what the definition of lie is? And is the FBI even looking at that? Joining me to discuss are Martha Coakley, former State Attorney General, now partner at Foley Hoag. Hello there, Martha.
Hi,
and Brian Kelly, former Assistant U.S. Attorney, one of the prosecutors responsible for putting Whitey Bulger behind bars. He's now a partner at Nixon Peabody. Brian, it's good to see you, too.
Good to see you as well, Jim.
This whole issue, there seems to be an agreement, at least in words, that if he lied under oath, then he's disqualified. Even for those who love Judge Kavanaugh, the candidate, it's pretty clear, based on those two sets of hearings, he has lied to this committee. Is that not a given, Brian?
No, that's not a given. I don't know what you're saying is the lie, about how often he drank in high school. That's the standard we're now using to determine who's a Supreme Court justice?
How about Devil's Triangle, by the way? No one ever heard of it as a drinking game, rather as a threesome until he said it was a drinking. How about the Renata alumnus, where he said, it was to show our affection in the yearbook, when she herself said it was horrible and hurtful?
So here's the situation. He's been a prominent lawyer and judge since he was 25. Having no basis to discredit him in his professional career, now they're going back to his high school years and looking at his yearbook. Doesn't that strike you as a bit absurd?
Does it strike you as absurd?
No, not given the allegations brought by Dr. Ford. And keep in mind, he has an initial background check. He has several after that, but they don't go back to scratch. They look at the time period from each time, and if the more powerful you are, the less they look at it, unless someone comes forward. That's what happened this time. Somebody came forward with allegations about which I think he has, at best, been less than truthful, as well as contacting witnesses, trying to get people on his side. New allegations that are coming out this week about what he was trying to do to prop up his reputation in front of this congressional hearing.
I was going to get that later. I assume what you're talking about is the NBC report where suggested prior to the New Yorker piece about Deborah Ramirez, that NBC at least reports that Judge Kavanaugh was in touch with former Yale classmates in an attempt to get them to cause, I believe NBC is reporting, Deborah Ramirez not to go public with her story. Why is that troubling? If he says he didn't do it, why shouldn't he discourage her through supporters who were in his class to urge Ramirez not to say what she said?
So two things. Let's find out whether it happened or not, and was he telling them just to back him up because they're his friends or because it was the truth? Secondly, he said he didn't know anything about that issue in testimony until the New York article came out. That's not true if those other facts prove to be true.
Are you troubled by the fact that the FBI, in this, from what we understand, and it's really sort of a moving ball, no one knows, there are strong reports this morning that they're not looking at all into the question of whether or not he told the truth about his drinking. Does that matter to you at all?
Well, whatever the issue is, it's very hard to do a thorough investigation in 1 week. And to me, What's the old saying? Timing is everything? The timing here is quite suspicious.
How so?
Has anyone asked the Democrats if they had this report, why didn't they pursue it with the FBI back in July? Why didn't they pursue it with the Senate under confidentiality rules? Instead, they waited to the 11th hour.
You're talking about Professor Ford.
Yes.
Well, it's been raised by every single Republican on the committee, what you're saying.
Yes, so the time here is quite suspicious, and an objective observer might say, well, if this was so important to have a thorough FBI investigation, you can't do it in a week.
But you know
why didn't you do it in July?
You know that the delay in this investigation was not requested by those horrible Democrats. The thing that caused it to happen was a Republican Senator, Jeff Flake, saying, I'm not voting yes until there's an investigation. So it's not the Democrats moving the goalposts.
That's because they got it at the 11th hour. If it had been thoroughly vetted back in July when the Democrats had it, they could have thoughtfly reviewed it.
Except, can I just respond to that,
You can
though?
respond
I mean,
anyone
look,
want.
having done these cases and
You too,
knowing,
Brian.
knowing the, sensitivity around this, that someone comes and says, I do not want to go public with this. If Dianne Feinstein came and said, I have a complaint, but the person has to remain anonymous, they would have laughed her off and said, we're not going to look at it. We won't bring a criminal charge. We're not going to look at it if she's anonymous. So I understand the argument the Republicans have made, but this is where we are now. And in a week, they could look at that entry on July 1st, that he was drinking with his friends. It's Thursday night before Beach Week, and they're out having beers. And they could do a little bit of work to corroborate whether that's true or not in terms of what she's already said about the House.
I think Senator Grassley said there are rules in place in the Senate where this can be vetted confidentially, and it could have been given to them in July. It wasn't, for obviously what appears to be a tactical advantage. Now, here we are. So what do we do going forward?
Brian, in your former life, Martha Coakley, you obviously had to determine who's telling the truth to the best of your ability and who's not telling the truth. One of the two major players has taken a lie detector test. One of the two major players said, I want the FBI involved. Let's on the lie detector test for a second. If you had one person in front of you who had taken a lie detector test, apparently by a former FBI person, would you not urge the other person, in this case Brett Kavanaugh, to take one as well? Maybe that'll resolve something.
Well, lie detector tests are notoriously unreliable depending on who's giving them. Defendants, oftentimes very guilty defendants, offer to take them if they can use their polygrapher. So I wouldn't be so sure that a lie detector test is going to give us the answer.
Would you not say to a Brett Kavanaugh, Brian, my office is going to pick who administers the test. Are you willing to take it? You pick the lie detector.
You could do that, but here what you have is you have the testimony of the witness who says, I only had one beer, and yet despite having only one beer, I don't remember where this alleged incident happened. I don't know how I got there. I don't know how I left. I initially tell my therapist there's 4 boys. Now that's changed to 2. And in fact, it's not he said, she said. It's she said, they said. Because the 4 people she identifies have said, no, didn't happen, including her female lifelong friend.
That same female lifelong friend, by the way, says she believes Professor Ford.
Because they said they don't remember it, which is different. Olive, we talked about what you remember or not. She doesn't remember where or when, but she remembers what happened and who did it. That's the important thing. She's identified him. She knew him. She knew Judge, and she recognized who they were.
Can we talk about one person who, by the way, who apparently the FBI is not going to, or at least hasn't so far, even though Susan Collins, a critical player here, says they'd like him to, Julie Swetnick. She speaks to Kate Snow on MSNBC. There are 2 parts to this. One, she's talking about the seriousness of what happened to her, and one, she seems to be changing her story a little bit. Just listen.
What happened to me is probably the most horrendous, awful thing that could happen to any human being. My body was violated. My soul was broken. I was not able to have somebody stop when I said, no, stop.
Did you see Brett Kavanaugh, spiking the punch, putting green alcohol in the punch?
I saw him giving red Solo cups to quite a few girls during that time frame, and there was green punch at those parties. I saw him around the punch, I won't say bowls, or the punch containers. I don't know what he did, but I saw him buy them, yes.
That second half is different, dramatically different, I would argue, from what she swore in the affidavit. Would that not cause you concern?
Well, but we're not talking about her necessarily. We're talking about, look, there were several witnesses and others that came out against Cosby. They didn't use all of them against him, but it's part of a picture and pattern. Maybe she's making it up. I doubt it. Maybe her memory isn't as good, but it's part of the bigger picture. I don't think anybody expected the FBI this week to look at it, but I do think there are...
Why shouldn't they look at it?
Well, I think what they should do is focus on, in the short period of time they have, as to whether they can say, we believe that Dr. Ford is telling the truth. We're not going to have a DNA test. We're not going to have a video. And we're not going to have a Perry Mason moment
Well,
here.
this third person here, if she's totally making it up, she should be investigated for lying to the FBI and causing all this...
Well, that's a different issue, though. It doesn't get to...
Well, she hasn't talked to the FBI, by the way. She's talked to a reporter
She's been sued, I think, in the past for making false claims.
So let's go after victims.
I'm not saying that, but if you're just going to make false allegations to pile on to a situation, that's not right.
I know,
but can
I'm
I just
saying
say,
they should be investigated.
We only have a minute or so left here. Did you read Larry Tribe's piece in the New York Times about the likelihood that, in his estimation, that a Justice Kavanaugh would have to recuse himself based upon his opening statement talking about left-wing groups and liberals and all these kinds? Would that not concern you?
I did not read the article, but, you know...
Well, you heard his opening statement where he's attacking the Clintons and left-wing partisan
He initially was attacked for being
groups.
too meek and mild and too judge-like, but now when he's being attacked with what he says is a false accusation, it's no wonder he gets exercised, and it's no wonder he's a little less judicious in his approach. So that doesn't surprise me that in responding to what he thinks is totally false allegations, he gets a little wound up.
Well, he got a little wound up. You're on the hiring committee. You're not. I don't know if you are, but if you were on the hiring committee of your law firm and a guy comes in and he's crying, he's red-faced, and talking about drinking beer, would you hire him for your law firm?
I certainly don't like men who cry.
No, I'm serious.
I do like men who drink beer.
No, but I'm serious about that, Brian. Would you hire this guy who, based on the testimony that he gave in front of the Senate?
He's a brilliant lawyer. He's been a brilliant judge. There's no question about that. That's the reason he's being challenged with these high school allegations as to whether or not he bought Solo cups or whether he had beers in high school.
Well, maybe he's being challenged because he attempted to rape somebody.
Well, you know, that's what they're trying to determine. But the fact that she waited 36 years to lodge this allegation against him is something that must be considered in determining who's telling the truth.
Can we speak to that? We only have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I wouldn't hire him just because of the way he treated Senator Klobuchar, among other things. But in 1983, Brian, in Massachusetts, if you didn't have an opportunity to come forward, wouldn't come forward. If that young woman came forward to me now at 15, I would say, let's investigate this because we may have a case. I also, unlike the prosecutor the Republicans hired, I would look at that case because I think you could prove it.
We got to go. Martha Coakley, thanks so much. Brian Kelly, great to see you.
Good to see you.
As always, appreciate your time.